After US, UK, Australia, another country has tightened its visa rules, and it's New Zealand. Before we get into what's changed and the likely impact on Indians, Immigration Minister Erica Stanford's explanation on why is very important for context. The minister has said it's important to New Zealand's immigration policies and to match it with the economic needs, to also mitigate migrant exploitation, resetting the immigration setting to rebuild the economy. And while attracting and retaining highly skilled migrants, it's critical in areas of skill shortage. It's important to ensure New Zealanders are put to the front of the line of jobs and get ample opportunities where there's no skill shortages. That is important. Another country that's looking inwards to jobs for locals first. We'll get to that in a bit, but what's the changes? English language proficiency must for migrants applying for jobs, particularly for low-skilled jobs. Minimum skills and work experience criteria has been initiated. It's must. And the maximum continuous stay, which means at a time, a period that you can stay the maximum for, particularly for the low-skilled jobs, has been reduced from 5 years to 3 years. Conditional hiring of immigrants based on shortage internally, and higher accountability of employers has also been envisioned in these changes. Now, it's interesting that while highly skilled force as well as students are largely the immigrants from India to New Zealand, experts suggest considerable Indians with mid-level or low-level skill set have been increasingly immigrating to these countries, particularly New Zealand as well. And that's where these changes matter. I'm being joined by Dr. Vandana, who's the Director of Immigration Advisors for New Zealand Limited. Thank you so much, Dr. Vandana, for joining us. Before we get to the changes, what is the sense that you're really getting at this point? Are you getting calls from Indians? Are there concerns around this? What are you picking up?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, we're getting a lot of questions, a lot of concerns with people who were in the process of applying for a work visa. Also, a lot of concerns from those who are already on a work visa, but they're not too sure of what their pathway would be. So definitely there are a lot of questions coming in because of these recent changes.
So what are the changes particularly for Indians?
Okay, so that's a good question. But before I reach on what are the changes, I would probably like to give a perspective of why these changes, what was the need to bring about these changes. So then they would understand better on whether these changes have a positive implication or not. So the major reason for the change is because this accredited employer work visa, which was a newly introduced policy introduced few years back after the COVID reopening, had potential of exploitation. There were a few things that was really not targeted well, and that led to a migrant exploitation, especially for a little unskilled or low-skilled migrants.
Okay. Now, but if you can really get to what these changes really are, if you can, explain that to us very clearly.
Yes, what are the changes? Okay, the first change for low-skilled workers, I'm trying to keep the terminology very simple so that everybody understands. So there are skills which are termed as occupation, termed as skill level 4 or 5. So something which is a low skill kind of a role here in New Zealand, English language requirement has been made mandatory, and it was never before was English a requirement for a work visa, which has been made now. The second change is that for certain low-level or low-level occupations or jobs, a more rigorous labor market test has to be done. That means the employers would have to lies with a work and income. That's a group which makes sure that New Zealanders are given opportunity. So more process so that New Zealanders get an opportunity to work in low skill roles before these roles are given to a migrant and then hired for that role. So that's the second change. And the third change is that the duration of the visa has been reduced for low skill roles from 5 years to 3 years, and the maximum continuous stay has also been reduced. So what it means is, if somebody comes here to do a job in a role which is termed as a low skill level 4 or level 5 occupation here in New Zealand, they will have to have a stand down period wherein they would have to go outside the country or move to another visa before they can be given a further work visa, accredited employer for the same low skill role, or they must have a pathway to residence.
Okay. Okay. What are the implications of these changes for Indians? I mean, you know, when we look at statistics, there are almost 5% of Indians who are part of the population in New Zealand. That's a large number. So what are these rules really implying, particularly for the Indians who aspire to go there or are residing there?
Was never like this. So we do have highly skilled Indians coming in for various roles, for work visa, pathway to residence, students coming here for studying and then eventually moving on to work and then have a residence sorted here. So low skill roles were never a major chunk. It's just last few years which saw the influx in this, in this number. So these changes will have no implication, in fact, for highly skilled immigrants from India, highly skilled people from India who were wanting to work, who were wanting to maybe relocate and have a residence path or a work path here in New Zealand. Nothing changes for them.
All right. Just a last question to clarify this. What about Indian students who want to study there particularly? Are they going to be affected?
Yes, no, it doesn't impact students at all. So students can still come and study here. They get part-time work rights, which is still available post completion of the study. If they had post-study work visa options, that remains. Pathway to residence again remains. So it doesn't impact. It doesn't impact much of the highly skilled Indians who are wanting to work here in New Zealand. It doesn't impact them. It's more to protect the rights of migrants which are working in low skill roles, just so that they are not exploited here in New Zealand.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Vandana Rai, for joining us, for bringing us that important perspective. It's very late there, but thank you so much for joining us. And I'm being joined by Parvez Memon right now, who's a senior partner for MZM Legal LLP. He's also somebody who deals with a lot of immigration cases. Thank you, Mr. Parvez Memon, for joining us. Very quickly, if you look at the larger picture, if you look at countries across, from US, UK, Australia, now to New Zealand, countries are looking inwards, not new. You've had a Middle East crisis in the past when you look at India, particularly for Indian immigrants who were living in Middle East. Again, in Middle East as well, a lot of people who were going for otherwise that was seen as low or mid-skill level jobs. And then you had a crisis there where people were looking inwards locally, where they should be getting the employments first before looking at Indians or others who would be coming in. Now, how do you look at what's happening in New Zealand in the larger picture globally?
Well, Sneha, in my view, there are two perspectives to this. One, we are talking of immigration, and two, we are talking of work visas. So in my personal view, it is a discretion of any sovereign state to either make or amend the rules regarding the visa applications of any of the migrants who are likely to come to that country. Given that fact, I am sure that the External Affairs Ministry, which are concerned for grant or refusal of visa in this regard, may have taken into consideration all pros and cons of this decision when they wanted to amend the rules. Now, having said so, as we have heard from Vandana, it is not likely to affect many of the high-skilled set of people who are migrating to the New Zealand, because as we see that India has no dearth of talent. All the Indians that invariably migrate to either Australia, New Zealand, UK or USA, whatever the country be, are highly skilled people who are evaluated based on the merits. They would not be affected by this decision. And as far as the low-skilled workers are concerned,
Mr.
as
Parvez
rightly
Memon,
been
allow me
communicated by
to come
Vandana
in.
here is...
Even Miss Vandana Rai, and according to what the data
Yes,
that is coming in from New Zealand and other countries as well, there seems to be a big demographic shift in Indian immigrants. There's a larger chunk of even the low-skilled or the semi-skilled workers who are moving abroad to these countries that have had immigration change policies, including New Zealand. So in the light of that, with the changing geopolitics, what should these Indians, whichever strata, of course, the highly educated or the highly skilled are not going to be affected that much from what we see across countries. But if you're looking at the mid-skilled or the low-skilled, how is the global perspective changing, particularly for Indians?
So Sneha, even if you look at the numbers here, from 2011 until 2020-24, the people who have migrated in totality to New Zealand is only 18,000 people. Of this, if you minus the highly skilled people, I'm sure the amount that is left for the low-skilled workers would be meager, and that should not bother any of the Indian here back home. We in India have not less of opportunities for such low-skilled workers. It is for our own country to create such opportunities for our own people. Like in New Zealand, they say that the local people first. In India also, we should come up with the policies for the low-skilled workers that Indians would be given priority over foreigners, if at all that is a policy.
All right. In fact, you know, Parvez Memon, the fact that you say that, and just possibly a quick question, and I'm trying to here understand the geopolitical scenario. I'm trying to understand what it means, and not particularly to New Zealand. I'm trying to understand what it means with the changes that are happening across country. You are saying across countries. You are saying India must have the policy for locals first as well, for the low-skilled or the mid-skilled first as Indians and then abroad. But the fact remains, what they earn abroad and the opportunities that they have abroad is far higher in their stakes than when you look at staying back in India and doing the almost similar jobs.
I agree, Sneha, but that is the situation. You know, every state, we can't force our people on other countries. It is our own responsibility. It is for our own policymakers to take care of all of us. As we are seeing that the country is developing in the right direction, India first, Make in India, all of these policies by the government are quite optimistic I am about it, that low-level skilled people would get enough opportunities in India itself. Why should we look at elsewhere? Why should we be dependent on any other nation when our own nation has so much of opportunities within ourselves?
All right. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Memon, for joining us. That's a question that's very open-ended, and I wish we had answers for that in terms of at least the opportunities and the data. The picture is very contrast to that.